All right, I have a brief presentation just to delve a little deeper into how we develop our four-year plan in the Wichita Falls District. Kind of piggybacks on several things that Elias had talked about and that Tom talked about. But for us, development of a four-year plan is not just about improving our PMIS scores. I know that's what we're generally graded on, and that's how our success of our four-year plan is gauged. But for us, it's making sure that we have money on projects where the greatest need exists. Like I mentioned, our PMIS scores, this is just kind of a little brief snapshot of our scores, and you can see that they've kind of hovered around 92, and as expected, when they started the new PMIS data gathering method, our score dropped about 2 points this past year. One of the things that's very important to us is we want to make sure that we get involvement from all the offices, not only the area offices and maintenance offices, but we want to make sure that district personnel, area office personnel, maintenance personnel are working together on this, because if maintenance personnel believe that this is how the district selects their projects, then we probably need a little more communication back and forth. Our four-year plan, it includes our contracted plans, which includes rehab, district-wide seal coat, also in-house projects and routine maintenance. Initially, I'm just going to talk about our first, the contracted projects, those that we let as general construction projects. What we do is we start off with a project call. I'll just send an email out with a spreadsheet attached to it, asking area engineers, maintenance section supervisors, and assistants to submit projects to us for consideration. Over the years, we've tried to make this process as simple as possible on those guys, just because we don't want it to be so overwhelming that they hate seeing this spreadsheet every time they receive it in the email. So basically all we ask for now is project limits and the type of work that they're proposing and a rough estimate. Once we get those projects back in the district office, we'll go through and we'll add ADT. We'll take a look at truck percentage, skid, PMIS conditions, surface age, and things like that. And from that list, we'll basically create a short list of projects because we only have limited funding. So we'll just take what funding we forecast over the next 4 years, and we'll begin to select projects that are kind of pre-ranked until we run out of money. That's the list of projects that we develop maps with. So we'll take these maps, and we'll also use the pavement analyst, and we'll make sure that we're addressing PMIS scores, skid, and then we'll use those maps also to drive around on our roads, and we'll actually put eyes on each project that's proposed. Area engineers, they'll go out and drive all of the roads that are proposed for our district-wide seal coat. They'll score and prioritize those. And then the directors, myself, Director of Construction and Director of Operations, we'll go out and we'll drive all the other rehab roadways. We'll also, usually one of the area engineers will tag along with us when we're in their section, just so they can kind of explain kind of some of the thought process or what they were actually envisioning or scoping whenever they submitted the project. Once we get out and we drive the projects, then we go through the prioritization or the scoring process. And I'm not saying that the AEs use, digressed or rock, paper, scissors, but however they come up with their prioritized list, that's on them as it's on us to develop a similar list for the rehab projects. But once we get our list prioritized, we'll then meet and we'll actually start talking about funding these projects and in what year. So we want to make sure also that we don't have any overlapping projects where we have a seal coat that immediately follows an overlay or something crazy like that, that's just going to duplicate effort and not be a good use of taxpayer dollars. Once we get that list developed, we'll input projects in DCIS. We'll also have maps and everything available to the maintenance section assistants and supervisors, and we'll also distribute those via email, and they're always available on our district website. Any projects that were identified early on that don't make it in the next or the upcoming fiscal year, we'll try to we'll program those in the next 3 years, but inevitably they get looked at again whenever we go through this cycle in the following year. We'll talk a little bit about some of the in-house projects. That's basically where the maintenance funding comes in, and this is the rough distribution of maintenance funds. Before in the past, we may have had $6 to $8 million that we were going to try to distribute to our maintenance sections. And it may have been that they just said, well, we have 12 maintenance sections, we have $6 million, let's give them each $500,000. But, you know, they tried to come up with a more sophisticated way of distributing those funds. So we take a look at rank sum, especially upcoming seal coat roads, because we know there's going to be some work that needs to be done on those before the roads can be coated, and then also PMIS scores. And then routine maintenance, those projects are also submitted. Mainly it's things like edge drop-offs, crack sealing, and projects like that. But once we get all these projects entered in DCIS and Compass, we'll get together with the area engineers, maintenance section supervisors, and assistants, and actually pull up pavement analysts and take a look at those projects and make sure that, you know, are we addressing all the areas that we have issues. We'll look at each individual road. We'll also include traffic to coordinate striping, because there's nothing worse than going out and having to seal coat over a freshly striped road. So that's kind of a brief rundown of what we do. Now I'm going to go on to Pete.
And Pete's going to give us a peer reviewer's perspective. Pete had the opportunity to sit in through all the 25 districts' 4-year plan, and I'm sure it was a valuable experience, and we'd love to hear about it.
Excuse me. Thank you, Blair. Appreciate the opportunity. You know, there's 25 different districts and 25 different ways of doing things. The process that Mike just went over is probably similar for a lot of folks out there. I've had the opportunity over the years as a director of maintenance, now as a D, and now also part of the peer review team, to get some perspective. And at the end of the day, we are judged by the PMIS score. And so that is a starting point. But we also have to keep in mind that we try to do a bottom-up approach when we look at things. Obviously, I still yet to meet a maintenance supervisor that doesn't want to overlay every road in his county. That's a Cadillac, right? Just overlay everything. Well, we all recognize that our bread and butter is a seal coat program. But in order to make that effective, we need to make sure that we're doing the proper prep work for that roadway, so that when a seal coat does come, or perhaps an overlay, we get the biggest bang for the buck. Funding is always a challenge, and we all recognize that. There has to be a balance. At the end of the day, as engineers, we have to balance things out. There's a PM program, seal coats and overlays, but then we also have, light rehab, medium rehab, and heavy rehab. And we have to be aware that each project has to be engineered. We have to look at soil conditions. We have to look at existing ADT. We have to look at the if there's going to be a big block store coming in, for example, and all those things. Well, who better to know that information than your maintenance supervisors and their engineers? So we try to funnel things up from the bottom up, and at the end of the day, distribute the money as needed. So there are some challenges out there. You know, there's various districts that have gone very analytical in what they do, and I praise them for that, because you have to have a justification in the back of your mind to be able to properly rank all the projects. But we also have to be practical, and there's nothing more valuable and important than getting eyes on the road. And that doesn't mean just the director of maintenance. It doesn't mean just the maintenance supervisor. Really, it's any and everybody that is involved with the pavement selection process. So as we move forward, I did have the opportunity to sit in the reviews for these this past summer. Obviously, that peer review team is led by Michael Lee. Then there's several district engineers and other administration staff that help support the whole program. And what we're looking for in that whole process is to ensure that we are taking a look at the district level. You all may recall back in 2009, I believe, was the first time we had a 4-year peer review. And as a director of maintenance, I remember being super nervous going and presenting in front of all these experienced district engineers and maintenance division director. And it was a scary moment for me at that time. But I quickly realized that these folks know what they're talking about. If you think you're going to go up to the maintenance division room there and try to BS your way through things, trust me, it's not going to work. These guys have been around. They know the business. former directors of maintenance, directors of operations, district engineers. They've been exposed to a lot. So please don't try to kid yourself. You need to be prepared. The purpose of us bringing it back, and if I say something out of line, Mike and Mike, you all correct me, but the purpose of having this process is to ensure that we do have the QC/QA process in place at each district. We went away from 2011 or so to 2015 or 16 perhaps, and what happened? We had this going on at the various districts. So this was a way to, if you will, standardize what we do and ensure that the proper QC/QA was being developed for each district as far as the 4-year payment plan. We also requested the help of CTR during those years, and now Payment Analyst is going to help us move forward. But the intent here is to make sure that we're not just picking projects at random. I love your cartoon slides there. Sometimes it may feel that way for maintenance supervisors and their engineers. There is a lot of work and effort that's being done at the district level to ensure that we pick the right projects. Prepping the roads, in-house work, that is key. Nothing will drive a director of maintenance or a district engineer more crazy or mad than driving down the road that was recently seal coated and you have rutting, or you have major failures. Why? Because in essence, you just wasted all that money. On average, about $25,000 a center lane mile that just went out the door because you didn't do the proper prep. Part of that is a proper planning, if you will, as far as throughout the year, and not waiting till the last minute to do that prep work, because you need to allow an opportunity for materials to cure so we can have a more effective process. Having field reviews as a team, you know, when we're there at the maintenance division headquarters and we're talking about the plans, we quiz you. What have you done? What is your process? Who's responsible? You'd be surprised, but there were a couple of districts that were a little, I would say, confused as to who was responsible for the 4-year plan. Make no mistake about it, folks. You're a director of maintenance, a director of ops, you're responsible. What happens when you give an order and you don't call out the person that's responsible? Everybody goes their own way, right? And nothing is channelized and funneled through an individual. You as a director of maintenance, you as a director of operations are responsible for that plan. You need to ensure that you're getting your proper input from all the powers that be. Then we need to make sure that we share and communicate that plan. What happens if a maintenance supervisor doesn't know that road was picked for a seal coat, say in year 2? They're gonna go and maybe not do any work on it, or they may go and spend a whole bunch of money on a roadway that's gonna get, say, a rehab. So we need to make sure that we communicate the plan. One method that we feel was a good process is to actually plot out the county map for that maintenance section and giving it to the maintenance section supervisor, putting it on the board so everybody knows these are the projects we're working on in the next 4 years, and that should be very important. We did also hear of some challenges. There were some observations, if you will. Some folks brought up the issue of Category 1 funding being used to supplement, if you will, change orders in construction. At the end of the day, as district engineers, we only have certain pots of money that we can go to. Category 1 is the easy button, if you will. That's the most flexible opportunity we have. So that is a challenge. We encourage you to work with your district engineer and your TP&D to make sure that it's balanced out. In some cases, there was a lot of PM work being proposed and very little rehab, light, medium, or heavy. So when we look at preparing roads, we need to identify what are the best opportunities to ensure that we're doing the right thing for the road. And it's okay if your PMIS scores goes down 1 or 2 points, if you will, for a couple of years, as long as there's a plan to address it, say, within the 4-year plan. And why is that important? Because if you're gonna go and waste money to kick up your score for a year or 2, and then it's gonna go back down, you really haven't done a good service to your district. So please ensure that you take a look at that. Look at your resources. Funding is a challenge. And you can pick 200 projects to do, but if you can't get the road prepped and you can't get all the work done with your in-house crews, what good would that do? You need to plan your resources, material, equipment, funding, contracting, all those opportunities you may have. Excuse me. Skid. Want to focus on skid a little bit. You may have noticed that we had those skid maps this past summer being brought to y'all's attention. Some districts did a great job. Their skids are up to par. They skid the roads every 1, 2, possibly 3 years. Others, it was very evident that they had not skidded the roadways in a long time. That is a very important factor. I mean, when you look at accident data, skids play a big role. And sometimes going in and say doing a seal coat on a roadway, it helps improve your skid score. But we did focus on the skid to make sure that the various sections do work together. In some cases, it was a construction office was taking care of the skid. In other areas, it was TP&D area, and in others, it was in maintenance. So whoever the responsible party is for skid data in your district, please ensure that that's kept up to date. And then the other thing we heard a lot of was succession planning. We have had a lot of turnover. Folks have retired, folks have moved on to other districts, folks have moved on to the private sector, whatever the case may be. And we need to ensure that we're doing the right thing moving forward and passing on this knowledge to the next generation. Because let's face it, as we move forward, there will be additional change. And if we're not doing a good job of stressing the importance of doing the proper planning, the proper balancing of funding, and the proper project selection, we could be in a lot of trouble. So please ensure that you're taking care of succession planning and career development moving forward. And with that, Blair, I think we're going to have question and answers.
So everybody, we thought this subject was important enough. We want to make sure to leave plenty of time for the audience so we can answer y'all's questions. So at this time, we're going to kind of turn it into just a panel type presentation. So does anybody have any questions over what's been presented so far? If not, I do. Pete?
Help them out, folks. Ask you. I know you have questions.
Pete, what information do you think is critical to show on the 4-year plan?
I think it's critical to have a plan that covers really all functional opportunities we have when it comes to seal coats, overlays, and the rehab program. If you're not showing where you're doing work, if you think about it, in a 4-year plan, at least approximately half of your roadway system should be getting some sort of treatment. Because otherwise, your pavement scores are going to deteriorate, your pavement structure is going to deteriorate. So having a plan that basically covers the entire county, if you will, if you break it down by county or the entire district in this matter, having a diversified plan is really, really important. Having a plan for those roadways that are showing up in orange and red, or maybe yellow, orange, and red on your PMIS. We're going to ask, what are you doing to this road in the next 4 years? And if you have a roadway that's say in orange, and you have nothing identified, you're going to be questioned on that. So I think those are the 2 areas that I would focus on. Make sure that problem areas in the PMIS you have a plan for, and you have a diversified plan across the district.
Now, Pete, you kind of touched on this a little bit, and I think it's critical to make sure we take our 4-year plan and communicate it back to our sections. So I'm going to pitch this at Mike. Mike, how do y'all communicate your plan to everybody in y'all's district?
We have quarterly supervisor meetings, and at those meetings, once we have our plan developed, we provide everyone there with hard copies of the maps and our plan, and we give them an opportunity to take a look at that and ask questions about it. And then as updates are made, if a project is accelerated or pushed back, or there's any modifications made to the letting, we make sure that we provide that information, and we'll send out an email with a link to the updated maps and project plans for them to have available.
Very good. Well, Mike, I'm going to ask you one more. What are some things that you plan on changing on next year's plan?
Well, next year's plan, I wasn't present at our peer review this past summer, but I know that when Glenn Allbritton and our DE came back, it was very evident that skid was going to play a much more major role in our planning, but also more use of pavement analysts. I know this past year, that was the first time that I'd seen pavement analysts, and we're going to use that quite a bit more, and we're going to have we started this past time, we had individual meetings with each maintenance office and area office so that we could go over the plan and we could discuss, you know, okay, you show a project proposed here to seal coat or overlay this roadway, but it looks like, as Pete mentioned, you know, we have a little orange out here that's not being covered up. Is that an error in data entry, in DCIS or Compass, or was that overlooked? So we can try to catch all that before it falls through the cracks.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
I would advocate as a former pavement engineer, and you talked to this just before that last comment about who is in the loop and who you communicate before your plan. If that could be made as a practice with the pavement engineer, that would give them hopefully time to marshal the forces for data collection, such as falling weight, radar, any other type of stuff that either get a consultant to do it or in-house forces or whatever. And I found that typically that takes some time to arrange, particularly if you're having to deal with traffic control for those type of functions and so forth. Regardless of where that pavement engineer, whether they're responsible under construction versus design, that's always been kind of a battle. That communication needs to exist about what's coming up as far as the roads you plan, particularly rehab.
So
Reconstruction.
the question is, how do we include our pavement engineer in the communication channel?
Well, I'm just saying,
And-
four-year plan might be a good way to do that.
Right, and so I'm gonna pitch this at you, Pete. How do y'all, put y'all's pavement engineer in the line?
Okay, so I'm gonna refer to the FAR district. I'm in transition we have a new district engineer in Laredo, and I think David Salazar is gonna do a great job there. But I have that experience in both districts, and in the FAR district, we actually have a plan matrix that our director of construction is responsible to oversee. He was a former pavement engineer. And so as we transition moving forward, it's about them helping us do the project selection through the whole process. The other thing that I would recommend is to make sure that you start the process early. One of the concerns that was brought to the table by many districts was that information, the data was very late this past year, and so decisions had to be made in a compressed time frame. And that put everybody in a little bit of a bind. One of the things that we did in Laredo last year was that we actually have some timelines. It's starting at the end of August, for example, our maintenance supervisors were looking to update the four-year plan. September, the area engineers made some decisions. October, the directors, and in November, the pavement plan was approved. Some of you may be saying, wait a minute, what happened to the winter? Well, in Deep South Texas, there is no winter. I mean, we might get 2 or 3 days if we're lucky. And we understand we're sensitive to that. But the point being, if you start your planning process for the four-year plan in the fall, come winter, you can go back and reevaluate, make sure that there was nothing freestyle cycles or things like that that may have affected your plan. But you're that much ahead of the game and not panicking in January, February, March to try and compress and get a plan together. So the recommendation would be start this process in the fall, do some preliminary legwork, get your pavement engineer in line as far as what projects are being selected, so you have ample time to do your skid test, your falling weight, the factometer, all those things that need to be done for the proper project selection.
Mike, you got anything to add?
Currently, our director of construction is, on paper, he's our pavement engineer. But he works with our designers, and so when a pavement design is needed or necessary for a project, the designer is actually working on that project, doing that pavement design. So initially up front, during the project selection process, we do technically have our pavement engineer involved. But then we'll also, I mentioned we provide that list of projects to our maintenance sections and area offices. But as a designer is beginning to work on that project, they'll have access to that list as well, and they'll see all of our comments from our drive around, from the AEs, from the maintenance section supervisors. So all of that information is passed down and funneled down to, even to the designer that's going to be developing that set of PS&E for that project.
Yes, sir.
Is there any looking at district lines and stuff, they're doing one road, keeping the pavement consistent or sharing that data amongst your neighboring districts?
So the question is, during the four-year planning process, our neighboring districts looking at each other to make sure that we get a consistent corridor. We've heard this before. there's no district lines according to the citizens, but we do make a district line, so, Mike, how do y'all handle that?
If it's gonna be something like an overlay or seal coat or something like that, no, generally, we don't have a lot of communication other than just to inform our neighbors of what's going on. Now, if we're doing a widening, upgrading a road to a super two, we've actually coordinated that type of work with neighboring districts and even extended beyond our district boundaries, so to speak.
Pete?
Yes, I would look at the major corridors, and there's some roadways out there, NHS system, if you will, trunk line system. You gotta look at those major corridors at least as a start, to make sure that you communicate that. And with this, all this data now being electronic, quite frankly, it's a matter of just opening communication. At the end of the day, you're gonna border however many districts, share that communication with the neighboring DOM or Director of Operations, and make sure that we're on the same page. We have gotten complaints. Why did you do this on US 90 in San Antonio and not in Laredo, as an example? And it's very difficult to answer that question. We usually say it's a funding issue and just kind of try to hide underneath that. But at the end of the day, the citizens don't care. There should be no district lines, and it's a matter of making sure that you're communicating the plan with your neighboring Director of Maintenance or Operations.
Yes, sir.
Engaging the maintenance supervisor, there's so much data, charts and all that, it's overwhelming, fairly easy. How do y'all engage them? I know you said you have the meetings, like yearly or quarterly or?
So the question is, how do we engage maintenance supervisors, given as much data as we can? Or we have so much data to give them, how do we engage them, and what kind of meetings do we have as far as how do we get them involved in the four-year planning process? Pete?
Well, like I mentioned, whenever we submit, or whenever we have the call for projects, we've gotten now to where we've reduced the amount of data that we ask from these guys, because initially, we were asking for DFOs, reference markers, ADT, truck percentage, everything under the sun, and we realized that, first of all, there's different sources where you can get this information, and one maintenance section may be getting it from one source and another from another. So, it helps us to uniformly get this data put together whenever we ask them just for the basics. Let us know which roadway, beginning, ending limits, and the type of work you're proposing, and just a rough estimate. So that's how we get, that's how we try to minimize the impact of those guys.
In the Laredo district, we had basically a foreman meeting every other month. And so we would review the plan itself, open it up for any discussions that they may have. In the FAR district, what we've been doing is the Director of Maintenance meets with the air engineer and the, say, 2 or 3 maintenance sections that report to him on a monthly basis, and have that discussion to ensure that any questions that they may have are being answered so that everybody's working towards the common goals.